Sehr geehrter Herr Rektor, liebe Frau Prodekanin, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, verehrte Gäste, lieber Rolf. Als Direktor des Instituts für Informatik ist es mir eine Freude und eine Ehre, die einführenden Worte zu Rolf Pfeifers Abschiedsvorlesung an der Universität Zürich zu sprechen. Ich lernte Rolf im Herbst 1991 kennen, als ich mich auf meine heutige Stelle bewarb und hatte mich vorab bei Gusti Zehnder ein wenig über die Professoren des IFIs kundig gemacht. Und als die Rede dann auf Rolf kam, meinte Gusti zu mir, Zitat, das ist ein ganz interessanter Mann. In der Tat, das ist er. Rolf Pfeifers wissenschaftliches Leben war und ist in vielerlei Hinsicht unstetig. Aber es gibt eine Konstante. Was ihn antreibt, ist die Frage nach dem Wesen von Intelligenz. Wie können wir Intelligenz verstehen und was folgt daraus? Was können wir tun? Lassen Sie mich ein paar Stationen aus seinem Leben herausgreifen und beleuchten. Rolf Pfeifer hat von 1965 bis 1970 an der ETH Zürich Physik studiert. Informatik gab es noch nicht. Allerdings hat das Informatikvirus ihn schon relativ bald erwischt. Seinen Studienschwerpunkt würde man heute als Computational Physics bezeichnen. Nach einem Ausflug in die Informatikpraxis bei IBM kehrte Rolf 1972 an die Universität zurück, um zu doktorieren. Am Lehrstuhl für klinische Psychologie beschäftigte er sich mit einem Projekt zur Simulation von Träumen, das schließlich in einer Dissertation mündete mit dem Thema Formalization Psychology using Computer Simulation with Special Consideration of Artificial Intelligence Techniques. Da haben Sie es, Artificial Intelligence. Nach ein paar Lern- und Wanderjahren wurde Rolf 1984 am Institut für Informatik der Universität Zürich sesshaft, soweit man bei Rolf von Sesshaftigkeit sprechen kann. Zunächst als Oberassistent, ab 1987 als Assistenzprofessor für künstliche Intelligenz und ab 1991 dann als ordentlicher Professor. Wie jeder neu berufene Professor am Institut gründete Rolf Pfeifer eine eigene Forschungsgruppe und nannte sie Labor für künstliche Intelligenz, AI Lab. Es war die Zeit der sogenannten Expertensysteme, dem Versuch, die Intelligenz menschlicher Experten mit Computersystemen zu simulieren. Solche Systeme wurden in Rolfs Labor gebaut und in Kooperation mit einer Bank auch tatsächlich praktisch umgesetzt und eingesetzt. Allerdings, die Ergebnisse waren ernüchternd. Statt nun einfach härter und intensiver an diesem Thema zu forschen, wie das manch anderer getan hätte, besann sich Rolf auf sein kreatives Talent und begab sich auf die Suche nach einem grundsätzlich neuen Weg und fand ihn in der New AI. Unmittelbarer Auslöser für den Paradigmenwechsel in Rolfs Forschung, weg von der symbolischen und hin zur verkörperten künstlichen Intelligenz, war ein Forschungssemester an der Freien Universität Brüssel im Winter 1990-91. Zurück in Zürich stellte Rolf sein gesamtes Forschungsprogramm um und wandte sich der Robotik zu, und dort ist er bis heute geblieben. Bald wuselten die ersten autonomen Roboter über die Gänge des IFI, gefolgt von biologisch inspirierten künstlichen Kreaturen, die hüpfen und tanzen und springen konnten, bis hin zu Dingen, die wir demnächst hier noch sehen werden. In seinem nächsten Forschungssemester, das er 1997 am MIT verbrachte, entstand sein Hauptwerk Understanding Intelligence, das ihm endgültig einen Platz im Olymp der AI-Forschung gesichert hat. Der humanoide Roboter Roboy, den wir noch etwas verdeckt hier im Saal zugegen haben, der zeigt uns in eindrücklicher Weise, was Rolf Pfeifer in 30 Jahren wissenschaftlicher Karriere am Institut für Informatik der Universität Zürich erreicht hat. Lieber Rolf, wir freuen uns auf deinen Vortrag.
All right, thank you very much, Martin, for the nice introduction, and thank you all for coming here. I'm really overwhelmed, by how many actually came here also. Many of you came from, other continents, from Japan, many from other countries in Europe. So, yes, thank you very much for coming. I will be talking about a scientist's odyssey in a globally networked society. Now, I went to Merriam-Webster to see what an odyssey is. It's a long and eventful journey or experience. So this somehow suggests, that this hasn't been really straightforward and easygoing. So an alternative title to this talk could have been a case study in serendipity. Again, we go to Merriam-Webster, and it says, finding what is serendipity, finding valuable or pleasant things not looked for. Now you can already imagine a bit which way we're going here. As a special feature today, we have a global video conference with people from Europe, from the United States, from Russia, from China, from Japan, and from Australia. So, and some of these people, especially the ones from the East, they have to stay up awfully late. I think it's already 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So thanks very much. I will be calling on each of them individually as we go along. So thanks very much for participating. Okay, now just a tiny little bit of background. What do we mean by artificial intelligence? In artificial intelligence, we basically have two goals. One is we want to understand what is intelligence, biological intelligence, or also artificial. We want to build artificial systems. So, for example, we want to build systems like this one. I will be talking about that a bit later. And we are looking for principles, and ultimately we would like to have something like a theory of intelligence, whatever that exactly would mean. Now, there are basically two views of intelligence. One that we call the classical one, intelligence as computation. And that's, I think many people believe that, intelligence as a computer program. You have an input, some processing, and then some output. And the other more recent view is the embodied one, which is intelligence from movement and interaction. I'll come to that in just a second. And on the right, you see beautiful illustrations drawn by a Japanese manga artist, Shun Iwasawa. Now, let me talk about the classical one for just a second. It's very compatible with this view that we all know from school, I think therefore I am, which proposes a very centralized view of intelligence basically sitting up here. If you look at the pictures here, you can also see, they're thinking hard, and it's all up here. And it turned out that during the Odyssey, one of the biggest challenges actually was getting this Cartesian heritage out of people's minds. Okay, successes and failures. I mean, this classical computational view has been enormously successful. I mean, just look at, and it's really transformed our society and our daily lives. Search engines, Google, chess, in the 1990s in New York, when IBM's Deep Blue won against Garry Kasparov, the world champion at the time. Big data, enormous success. I mean, we can't give a talk anymore these days without at least mentioning big data. And then manufacturing. So if it weren't for these manufacturing robots, we wouldn't have all the things that we love, like mobile phones, consumer electronics, cars, and things like that. So an enormously successful endeavor. Now on the side of the failures, where I think when people try to build systems for capabilities that are more natural and are very easy for us, like walking, talking, drinking, cooking, doing things around the house, there the approach has not been successful, and so people were looking for alternatives. And so the embodied approach came about, and there, intelligence, it says intelligence from movement and interaction. Now the question is, before it was about, up here, playing chess, high-level abstract problem solving, mathematics, and now it's about movement. So aren't we just doing something completely different now? Well, there's a nice quote by a British biologist, and he asked the question, why do plants not have brains? I don't know whether you thought about that yourselves. And then he says, well, the answer is actually quite simple. They don't have to move. Of course, plants do move, but they move passively in the wind, they turn towards the sunlight, but they don't have that spectrum of movements that we do. And what's interesting about this perspective is that in this view, the evolutionary selectionist pressure on the brain development, or on the development, what we now call intelligence, has come from the need to act in the environment, to move in the environment, to locomote in the environment, and to reproduce in the environment ultimately. So what's also important is when you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, there is always a complete organism that interacts with the real world. There is no algorithmic ether out there in which programs can run. And intelligence has also evolved always as part of a complete organism. Now, the body is the only way in which we can communicate with the outside world and learn anything about the outside world. So if we ever want to understand the nature of intelligence, we have to understand what the role of the body is in this process. And this is the topic that has occupied our research agenda for almost 2 decades now, the buzzword embodiment. Okay, but let's go back to the beginning of the Odyssey. Often people ask me, why did you want to build robots? And then the answer is, I never wanted to build robots. I basically got dragged into it. When you ask Japanese colleagues, they often say, actually, we have quite a few here that specifically came from Japan for this event. You ask them, then they say, well, they were inspired originally by Roboy, a comic series in the 1950s and 1960s, or in Japanese Tetsu Anatom. And their inspiration, their dreams actually came from this perspective. Now, I didn't have this dream. In my case, dreams came into the game in a completely different form. Okay, here we go. In 1974, I met Ulrich Moser. He was at the time a professor of clinical psychology at the University of Zurich and a very distinguished psychoanalyst. And believe it or not, he had money from the Swiss National Science Foundation to do a computer simulation of dreams. And basically simulating Freudian theory of dreams. And the idea was to use methods from artificial intelligence and knowledge representation, on knowledge representation and symbol manipulation to do this simulation. Now, when I talked to Moser, he said that he is looking for someone who can do simulation. And then I said, well, I had just finished my studies at ETH in physics. And then I said, well, I don't know anything about psychology, but I can do simulations. But the simulations have been in neutron physics rather than psychology. And then Moser said, well, simulation is simulation. If you like, you can have the job. And so I took the job. And so I started working in his laboratory. And then a fortunate coincidence was that I met Marianne Leutzinger-Bohleber, who is the director of the Sigmund Freud Institute in Frankfurt, and she was interested in applying methods from artificial intelligence, cognitive science, to psychoanalytic theory and to clinical practice. And so we started collaborating, and we first used a computational approach, the classical view, and then over time we used more the ideas from embodiment, and in the meantime, I think 2014, we have over 20 or 30 publications in psychoanalysis trying to get the idea that everything is happening here, up here in the brain, out of the minds of the psychoanalysts. Okay, now the project was interesting. We learned a lot. I learned a lot about psychoanalysis. We learned a lot about artificial intelligence. But the outcome of the project was rather disappointing. So the question was, I didn't really want to continue, and so the question was what to do next. Well, fortunately, another fortunate coincidence was that I had a scholarship by the Swiss National Science Foundation to spend 3 years in the United States, and so I chose a place Carnegie Mellon University with Newell and Herbert Simon, which are among the founding fathers of this discipline of artificial intelligence. And they were strongly endorsing a computational approach to intelligence. And Herbert Simon, modest as always, said, over Christmas, Alan Newell and I created a thinking machine. And then he added, by the way, this is the first time in the history of mankind that anyone has produced a thinking machine. So I thought this was the right place for me to go. And then I still had, I had to do some work there. And what I did as a continuation sort of or extension of this dream simulation, I started working on computational models of emotion. And again, I learned a lot about emotion, but it soon became clear that these were just programs. It was just a program like any other program that was missing the quality of real emotions. So I had to think about what to do next. And then another fortunate coincidence, I was asked by the Department of Informatics of the University of Zurich, where I would be spending the next about 30 years, whether I would like to teach a class on expert systems. Martin mentioned the expert systems in his introduction. And then I happily accepted. And at the time, the idea was expert systems. Some of you, the older ones, might remember in the 80s and 90s was a real hype. The goal was to replace human experts by machines, by using logical if-then rules. Now, here is an example of a rule. So if here from medical diagnosis, if a patient has red spots, patient has high fever, white blood count is less than that, then there is evidence that the patient has this disease. And we thought, really, in this way, we can, map human intelligence onto a computer. You just take enough of these rules, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands, and you have a human expert. It was about that time, around that time when we founded the Laboratory of Artificial Intelligence, as mentioned by Martin, and with two Swiss doctoral students. Later on, this would turn into an operation with almost 40 people from over 20 different countries. It was a real hype with these expert systems, lots of textbooks, lots of companies, being founded, IntelliCore, Symbolics, and so on. In Japan, they had this Japan 5th generation program, which was essentially about expert systems, and so on. So it was a huge hype. And we also built many systems, with renowned companies, or maybe now no longer so renowned companies, Credit Suisse, Tecon, Schindler. And we built many systems. We built beautiful systems. We showed the systems to the management. And the management was excited about the systems. However, alas, the systems were never used in practice. So, again, we were up against a real problem. We had been working with psychologists on these systems, and we had learned a lot about real human expertise and sort of began to realize that maybe, there is more to human expertise than a bunch of logical if-then rules. Now, we also came across work by Bill Clancy from Stanford University. He had been working on a number of expert systems projects, and we had read some critical papers by Bill Clancy, and he came up with an ingenious thought experiment. It's very obvious, it's very ingenious. He said, okay, takes this rule, the rule that I explained before, and what we do now is we replace all the words that we have in there by abstract variable symbols, like x1, x2, x3. And then this rule that you have, the upper rule, turns into the one that you have below, or something like that. Now, logically speaking, the two are 100% equivalent. The question is, he was then asking, well, but where's the meaning? Where's the meaning? If you look at the rule, the top rule, of course, you see, has meaning, medical expertise. If you look at the rule below, where is the medical expertise? No. The meaning is provided by the human user. The computer program has absolutely no clue about the meaning, and this is an instance of this infamous symbol grounding problem that would keep us busy for a while. How do symbols acquire meaning? We know, what red spots means. We know what a patient is, right? but the computer program basically has no clue. So we were up against a big problem, and the question again was, what do we do next? Another fortunate coincidence was that at the time, there was a buzzword around, a very important buzzword called neural computation. And around the world, many departments of neuroinformatics, neural computation, neural networks shot up like mushrooms all over the place. And the idea was actually it was a very good one, very natural one, getting inspiration from the human brain. I mean, the human brain is capable of so many great things. So why not get inspiration from the brain, and maybe we can build better computer programs? So artificial neural networks was, a big thing, and people also talked about brain-style computing. Now we have a completely new species of computer programs that reflect the activities of the human brain. And indeed, it turned out that these systems were extremely useful for learning, and we still use them a lot in our robots. Also, what was very beneficial at the time is that we started working in an interdisciplinary fashion, and ever since we've had interdisciplinary teams and always been cooperating with neuroscience, and I think we had a lot of inspiration from there and learned an awful lot. It was another real hype. I mean, sometimes I get the impression that artificial intelligence is a history of hypes. Another hype, neural networks, literally hundreds of textbooks on neural networks emerged, and it was very interesting, but still, we had, if we were interested in real biological intelligence, we had the impression that something crucial was missing. So the question again came, what to do next? Fortunately, I had known Luc Steels. He is one of the leading thinkers, has always been one of the leading thinkers in the field of artificial intelligence. He was not only a brilliant, or is not only a brilliant researcher, he is also good at acquiring funding, and so he had this chair from Swift. As we know, Swift has a lot of money, but Luc was really interested in going after the foundations. And so I had the privilege of going there for a year, and Luc had organized a workshop on the foundations of intelligence at this beautiful monastery in Gorsendonk in Belgium. They also make beer there. And we were really trying to tackle the foundations and, thinking hard, also working through the nights. And for me, there were in fact two important outcomes from this sabbatical stay in Brussels. One, or from this workshop, that we need to build, if we want to understand biological forms of intelligence, we need to build embodied physical systems. Remember at the beginning, I mentioned that you always have a physical organism that interacts with the real world, and our intelligence is always part of this organism, and we can get a lot of inspiration from biology, not only from the brain, but from biology in general. So we started seriously thinking about embodiment, so the question of what to do next was actually very easy. We needed to build autonomous systems and get inspiration from biology. And this was indeed a scientific life changer, and we completely changed our research program to biologically inspired robotics. So basically, thank you, Luc. Now, Luc should have been in the video conference today, but for some reason, last minute, he didn't make it. He now is sitting in an airplane, and since the technology is not so advanced yet that we can have video conference from the airplane, he cannot join now. So the idea would have been planned, I always say, let's plan to the extent that one can have plans, and you see, plans are meant to fail. Okay, so we started this biologically inspired robotics business. Let me just give you an experiment that we did a long time ago. I think that was roughly 20 years ago. So this experiment was done by René te Boekhorst and Marinus Maris. René te Boekhorst, a biologist, and Marinus Maris, an engineer. And they had an arena, 6 by 6 meters, filled randomly with styrofoam cubes. And they had some simple robots that they put in there. And then they put the robots to work. If you put the robots to work, this is what happens with the styrofoam cubes. Well, now what are the robots doing? Well, they're forming cluster, they're moving cubes together, and my favorite interpretation is they're cleaning up, which is why they're called the Swiss robots in the literature. Now, the question is, what are the robots really doing? That is, what are the mechanisms that are underlying the behavior? Right, now let's think about this from the point of view of a robot. If you were a robot that has the task to make clusters, what would you need to do? Well, you have to look for a cube, then you have to move up to the cube, you have to somehow get a hold of the cube, you have to look for a cluster, then you have to move the cube to the cluster, deposit the cube, and then this cycle repeats. Well, it can be very different. We had the following for the robots. What they were really doing is this. We had the following behavioral rule, or program, or control program, or brain, or whatever you want to call this. If there is sensory stimulation on the left, turn right. If there is sensory stimulation on the right, turn left. So they're programmed for obstacle avoidance. So I mean, this is supposed to be counterintuitive. You want to form clusters, you can't avoid the cubes. Well, how does that work? So imagine that one of the robots by chance is encountering a cube head-on. It doesn't get sensory stimulation on the left and not on the right, so in the front there you have this, maybe we can see this, you have this, this sensor and this sensor. It doesn't get sensory stimulation. So what happens? Well, it will actually push the block, but not because it's programmed to push the block or because it wants to push the block, but because it doesn't know of its existence, right? So how far does it push the block? Well, until there is a block here, over here, then this block is going to be here, then it will get sensory stimulation here and it will turn it away, and now you have two blocks together, and this process repeats, and then you get the clusters. Now, let's make an experiment. Let's change the morphology of the robot. Let's leave everything else as is, the environment, the control program. Let's just change the morphology a little bit, namely moving this sensor over here. Now, what happens if the robot encounters a block like this? It will get sensory stimulation here and it will turn away. You don't get the clustering behavior anymore. So everything is the same. You just make one minute change to the morphology and the behavior is completely different. So there is a strong interaction of the behavior and the morphology of the system. It's not only the brain of the robot that tells you what the robot's doing. And just for the fun of it, on the left, you can see what the robots are doing, and on the right, if you take a dish and you distribute dead ants into the dish and you add a few live ants, this is what the live ants will do with the dead ants. Okay. In summary, in Swiss robots, there is this interdependence between morphology and behavior, which is of fundamental importance, and still many people, I don't think, have fully understood the import of this idea. We also call this the principle of cheap design, because you exploit the ecological niche. If, you know, the styrofoam cubes have to have the right size, they have to be light. If you take concrete, it's not going to work. If you take away the boards from the arena, the robots will go off, it's not going to work. But as long as the conditions hold, it will work. Let me give you another example of an early bio-inspired robotics project. So we started working, that was roughly in 1996, we started working with an ant biologist, Rüdiger Wehner, and he was studying this elegant desert ant, Cataglyphis. This is the environment where it lives. And it has a very interesting navigation behavior. It goes out in a zigzag line, and when it finds food, it goes back to the nest in an almost straight line. And so we built robots, a number of robots, to better understand the navigation behavior of these ants. And it was kind of, and then we went to the desert to actually test these things. It was sort of an interesting mixture between science and adventure. And here, this is Wehner. This is Dimitri, a PhD student at the time, and he's the one who actually started this biorobotic stuff in our laboratory. It wasn't me, it was actually Dimitri. He had been done secretly. He had been doing experiments with PhD students from Wehner, and, you know, and then after a while he said, oh, by the way, I did these experiments. You know, I was excited, and since then, ever since, we have been cooperating with Wehner's group. Then over time, we started building many robots, you know, for many different species, for different tasks, for flying, walking, you know, what have you, swimming, hopping. And over time, this turned into a full-fledged research program in biorobotics. Okay, and ever since, building robots has turned into a great pastime for us. And we have been building robots. These are some early ones, some later ones. Build more robots, more robots, more robots, more robots, more robots. There's a story to all of them. Okay, and then, you know, during that time when we were building all of these robots and making these experiments, I had, again, a lucky coincidence. I had the opportunity to go to MIT, CSAIL, Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab with Rodney Brooks. And Rodney Brooks should also, I think he's also present in the video conference. Yes, yes, okay, yeah. Right, so he had a completely, I think he is one of the leading thinkers in the field of artificial intelligence and in robotics. And he had developed a completely novel way of viewing behavior. And what you see here on the left is an insect robot called Genghis, famous robot. And among other things, he was arguing, he said, well, it took evolution much longer to move from the primordial soup to insects than it took evolution to move from insects to human beings. So his argument went that once we understand insect-level intelligence, it will be relatively easy to achieve human-level intelligence, right? And so he said we should build insect robots. And he was, at the time, working with a German biologist, also a brilliant, absolutely brilliant person, Rolf Pfeifer. And you have to know that there is no center in the brain of the insects that controls the coordination of the legs in walking. Now the question is, how then is it possible that they can walk in a coordinated way? Okay, here's the secret. That's Kruse's insight. There is global communication between the legs, but it's not so much through the brain, but it's through the interaction with the environment. Now, how does that work? So basically you have the ant. Imagine the ant is standing on the ground, and it pushes back with one of its legs. Then what happens to the other legs? They're also moved. And they're moved actually in the right direction, the joints in the other legs. So you only need to reinforce this movement, and you need angle sensors in the joints, and then you have global communication between all the legs, but through the interaction with the environment. And again, what we call this the principle of parallel loosely coupled processes, loosely coupled because the coupling is achieved through the interaction with the environment. And again, it's not all in the brain. You have no way of understanding this leg coordination if you only look at the brain of these insects. Okay, and then we had done many, many experiments. And at some point you said, well, we should really try and summarize what we've done so far. And Martin mentioned that also in the introduction. We came up with a set of design principles. You can see here parallel processes, cheap design. There are a couple of other ones. And then we wrote this book that was published by MIT Press with Christian Schreier, and it was very nice. I think it was quite popular. It had one big flaw. It was over 700 pages. I mean, who wants to read 700 pages, right? But still, some people did, and Hiroshi Kobayashi, who is actually here in the audience, Ko Hosura, who was also here in the audience, and Akio Ishiguro, three, I think, very innovative thinkers in Japanese robotics translated this book into Japanese. Actually, Hiroshi Kobayashi was the first postdoc from Japan that I had in my laboratory, and they're all now famous professors at universities in Japan. And maybe, I think Akio Ishiguro is connected by video conference here. He is also the recipient of the Ig Nobel Prize, for those who know the Ig Nobel Prize. So maybe this would be a good place, Akio, for you to make a comment. Akio, are you there? Let's see. Akio, hi. So maybe this is a good time for comment from Sendai. So he's from Sendai at Tohoku University, which is one of the top universities in Japan. Akio, are you there? What time is it in Sendai? We can't hear you. We have a problem with the sound, Akio. Oh, it's amazing. Video conferencing has been around for, I don't know, almost 50 years, half a century, but still you get these technological glitches. Huh? Do we have sound from... We're working on the sound. Yeah. Oh, okay. I think we have sound now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, yes, very well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Well, Rolf?
Yes.
First of all, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude for your outstanding leadership in the field of embodied artificial intelligence. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay. For me, it is still hard to believe that the AI lab will be closed soon. However, spiritually, the AI lab will do exist over the world. So, although the AI lab will be closed, Rolf, your mission will never end. Please keep interacting with younger researchers all over the world and brainwash them with tons of beers.
Okay, thank you, Akio.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for joining so late. So what time is it in Japan?
1:34.
Okay, thanks for staying up for this. Right, okay, now there's more food for thought from Rodney Brooks. So, and that's about beyond computations. There was an interview, I think it was in 2002, something like that, and he said, well, maybe there is something beyond computation in the sense that we don't understand and we can't describe what's going on inside living systems using computation alone. And that, reflects our experience, with the dreams, with the emotion models, and, he talks about living system here. So maybe this would be a good point. Would you like to make a comment here, Rodney, from Boston?
Yeah, hi, Rolf. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes. Rolf, I'm so honored to be at your lecture today. You've been a friend for over 24 years since you were at the Swift Chair in Brussels, Corsendonk, and when you came to MIT as one of the zoo animals. And I must say that your MIT ID looked a bit like a zoo animal there earlier in the lecture. But for the audience, I just want to say about Rolf that Rolf is an extremist. We worry about extremists in the world, but I think we need more extremists. And Rolf has demonstrated in this lecture his extremism. He had robots manipulating blocks by not knowing they were doing manipulation. That's an extreme way of thinking about things. And then you saw all those robots that he built. He built intelligent robots with no brains. That's an extreme position. And then the 700-page book from MIT Press, 700 pages, again, extreme. So that's what we've come to expect from Rolf. And we are not disappointed today because he gives a lecture in Zurich and he has people from all over the world be part of it. So once again, showing his extremism. So thank you, Rolf. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the lecture.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so I was really fascinated by this idea of beyond computation, and I have been obsessed with this beyond computation, and I couldn't let go. And then at some point, we came across this notion of morphological computation. And the idea being that part of the functionality or the computation can actually be performed by the body of a system rather than having to be processed always in the brain. I will come back to this point later on. To illustrate this, we built this robot, Stumpy. It was actually developed by a number of people in our laboratory. And it's a very simple robot. It only has 2 joints. Well, I can hardly show it here behind this, pulpit here, It's like preaching, but, Akio said I should preach embodiment, so this is good for preaching. So it has 2 joints. You can do this, a hip joint, and you can do this. And then it has some springs on the feet. And if you do it right, the Stumpy can move in 20 very distinct ways, about 20 very distinct ways, so we built a few of them. And okay, I think you're getting the idea, right? Now, what's interesting, thank you. Now, what's interesting about this is you saw that the Stumpy robots, they were lifting off their feet, right? Now, if you look at the control program, you have no way of predicting the lifting off of the feet. You have to understand how the control is embedded into the physical system, and you have to understand the dynamics of the physical system. Only then can you understand this kind of movement. So again, it's not all in the brain. Okay. Now, so far, so good. Here's a great idea. It dates back to the 1960s, about simultaneously in the United States and in Germany. In the United States, it was John Holland. In Germany, it was Ingo Rechenberg of the Technical University in Berlin. And Rechenberg was an engineer. And he said, well, evolution, biological evolution has come up with great designs like the human being. And we all think, we're great designs, right? And he said, if we could simulate aspects, at least aspects of evolution on a computer, we might be able to exploit that for engineering design. And for us, it was, of course, maybe we can use that, apply that to the design of robots. And so we did a lot of work on simulation of evolution. Now, there is a field called evolutionary robotics. And, many people are working in that. What people normally do is they take a particular robot, can be any robot, and then they evolve a control architecture for the robot. Typically, this can be a neural network or something else. And I think very interesting results have been achieved. However, there is a big flaw in the whole thing if you're interested in biological intelligence. And that is, in biology, you never have a body and then evolution produces a brain for the body, right? But you always have, and we saw that at the beginning, you always have a co-evolution of the brain and the body. Right? There's not this separation. So what Josh Bongard in our laboratory was working on is co-evolution of brain and body, and he developed, then you have, in evolution you always have the evolutionary process, and then you have the process of ontogenetic development within that, from the individual, from the single cell to the adult organism. And so he had developed a very simple model, but effective model, of genetic regulatory networks and embedded that into an evolutionary system. And we were fortunate enough to get advice from Ernst Haven and Michael Levin, 2 of the leading developmental biologists in the world. And I think that was a very fortunate coincidence for us. Now, Josh set up, one time in the summer, Josh set up an experiment, and he only told his evolutionary system, I want a creature, whatever, that can push a large block. He didn't say anything else. Whatever, do whatever. I don't care how you do it, I just want a creature that can do that. He set up the experiment. We went off for drinks, and we had, another drink and another one. We didn't make it back to the lab. And when we came back next morning, this is what we saw in the computer. So this is Josh's voice here.
In our first set of experiments, we evolved agents to push a large block in their environment as far as possible during a fixed time period. Here we see an agent growing from a single starting sphere into a set of connected spheres. These spheres are loosely modeled on biological cells, but also serve as the basic mechanical unit from which the agent is constructed. Each unit contains a complete copy of the genetic information shaping the growth of the agent, as well as sensors, motors, and neural structure. As these units grow and divide, so too does the neural structure grow inside the developing body. The agent shown here was extracted from one evolutionary run after 2 hours. At this point, artificial ontogeny has discovered how to grow the brain and body of the agent together to achieve an inchworm method of locomotion. This agent is a descendant of the previous one and appeared in the evolving population after a further 2 hours had elapsed. Here, evolution has discovered that increased mass allows the agent to exert more force against the block.
Okay, I think I'll leave it at that. So I just take two messages here. One is the way in which this creature moved, the worm-like creature, was not programmed into that worm, but evolution has discovered how to move. The second thing that evolution has discovered is that if you want to push a large block, a large physical object, you need more mass to produce more force and more friction. Now, Josh Bongard should also have been in the video conference, but then he had to go to work for the National Science Foundation in Washington, D.C. So this is a pre-recorded video from him, so we can hear him talk.
Hello from the United States. I'm sorry that I can't join you live today, but I'm working at the National Science Foundation, so please forgive this pre-recording. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Josh Bongard. I'm a professor here in the US, but about 10 years ago I was one of Rolf's PhD students. And like all of Rolf's students, I learned many, many things from him. But the main thing that I learned from Rolf is that science is one of humankind's great adventures. Sure, science is hard, and it sometimes feels like you're pushing an immovable object against an unstoppable force. And sure, writing a book is hard. We worked on this one for several years. To keep his strength up, for example, here's Rolf finishing a Schweinshaxe. And here's the just finished final draft of the book, finishing Rolf. But science is indeed an adventure, and on an adventure, you never know what you'll be doing from one day to the next. Perhaps you'll be participating in a photo shoot for a Swiss fashion magazine with your fellow lab members. Or perhaps you'll be chasing a robot blimp down the main street of Zurich after it escapes from a science fair at the train station. On any adventure, you always meet a strange cast of characters and several fantastic animals. Sometimes it's difficult to know which are the characters and which are the animals. Rolf and Rod Brooks were the first revolutionaries to tell us that the body has an important role to play in intelligence, but they certainly weren't the last. For example, robotics is now exploding with soft robots that use their bodies in interesting ways. Fumiya Ida, another one of Rolf's past students, is leading the charge in this area. In my own group, we now combine multiple bodies, human bodies, with multiple computers and multiple robots in an attempt to crowdsource robotics. Many of Rolf's former students and colleagues are continuing the adventure of trying to understand intelligence. And although Rolf is saying farewell to being a professor, his part in this adventure is far from over. Rolf, I will see you, as always, in the future.
Okay, thank you, Josh. You can't hear this, but thank you anyhow. Okay, now I was going to talk about academic life, and academics not only do research, but they also teach. And this has always been a great pleasure for me. I've always had fun with students, especially when you get older. You know, it's important to have young people around. You know, they keep you alert. They challenge you continuously. They think differently. They're fast. And so I've liked teaching all along. And we didn't want to do only the standard kind of teaching, but here is something about global teaching. Well, why global teaching? So again, I had a sabbatical. It seems I did work in between. I did not only have sabbaticals. So I had a sabbatical that I could spend with Yasuo Kuniyoshi at the University of Tokyo. Yasuo Kuniyoshi is also one of the super creative Japanese roboticists. And when I was on sabbatical there, I thought, well, what am I going to do with my artificial intelligence class here in Zurich? And then we thought, oh, maybe we can do video conference. We had made some experiments before and thought, well, why not do a video conference? And then we thought, okay, well, now that we have this video conference all set up, why not include other universities so that they can benefit and we can benefit from them as well? And that's how the AI lectures from Tokyo were born. And in the first round, we had participating Tokyo, Zurich, Munich, Warsaw, Beijing, and Jeddah, sort of occasionally, at least. Okay, and so the host for the video conference, Yasuo Kuniyoshi, kindly volunteered to host the lecture series. I mean, it's a lot of, technology, a lot of resources that he put into this. And here is just some pictures that give you a bit of the mood. You can see on the right, you can see the lecture hall in Zurich, and you can see the various sites similar to how you can see them here in the video conference. And every week we started the lectures with a beautiful trailer from Daniel Biesik. Okay. Now, Yasuo Kuniyoshi, I said, is really a very innovative researcher. And here is from a slide. He actually sent me a whole presentation, which would have taken at least 45 minutes. And so this is the title that he sent me. He has been doing a lot of really groundbreaking work on embodied intelligence and applied this to fetal development. He has done some really brilliant simulations. So maybe this is a good point for Yasuo to make a brief comment. Yasuo, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Yasuo. What time is it now?
Yeah. It's 5 minutes to 2 a.m.
Okay. Okay.
So, Rolf, that was a very good memory, the AI lectures from Tokyo. My impression was that you are an extreme perfectionist. You were never satisfied with the audio or the video connections, presentations, everything. So you spent a lot of efforts on making everything perfect. And well, it was fun after all. I learned a lot from the style, But also it was a lot of effort. Well, I learned a lot of things from you. Of course, the most important thing is how to toast. So we, the believers, have to toast like this: embodiment. And of course, the essence and many new ideas of embodied AI. Also personally, you told me how to make a presentation better. I learned it. And most importantly, how to be nice and friendly. Yeah, it's amazing how many top-notch friends you have all over the world. But there are a few things, only one or two things that I told you.
No.
The first thing is how to eat sashimi properly. There is a particular order that you have to follow, when you eat an assortment of sashimi. Right? There's another thing I tried to tell you that is how to eat soba. Noisy, but you never agreed. There one technical thing that we discussed, and actually I told you, which was about the principles of active vision. And I think I remember that turned into a joint paper later. So that was really fun. Also, we discussed a lot about dynamical systems. That was really fruitful. So the joy is that, to meet you everywhere around the world, whenever we meet, we go for a drink. It's really fun. And Rolf, you are the permanent honored guest in my lab. So please drop in anytime. And finally, congratulations for your graduation and stepping up to the new stage, that you prevail in the world, okay? So I hope you even more successful future.
Okay, thank you very much, Yasuo. Okay, thank you very much, Yasuo. Actually, we had discussed a lot. I learned a lot from Yasuo because he was at MIT at the same time I was there. So we had basically a whole year to exchange ideas. So I did learn. I mean, it's unbelievable what I learned from him. Anyhow, so an important outcome from this stay there was we started writing on this book, How the Body Shapes the Way We Think, that Josh Bongard also mentioned. And it has a foreword by Ronnie Brooks, illustrations by Shuni Wazawa, and then this was also translated by Ko Hosoda and Akio Ishiguro into Japanese. Now, an interesting thing happened. While we were doing this Japanese translation, they really scrutinized the English version, and sometimes said, oh my, Ko wrote me a message and said, what did you mean by this? I said, oh man, did I write this? And but what we realized when we actually wrote this book or finished this book is that all of a sudden we had something that awfully looked like a well-structured research program, with artificial evolution, self-organization, educational technology, and so on. Right? So maybe this recalled the term serendipity, finding valuable or pleasant things not looked for. Maybe this is an instance of what Prigozhin had in mind when he wrote this book, Order Out of Chaos. And then, for all these research strands, we applied for projects. It's a considerable effort, as you all know. And I'm not going to go through all these projects, but I would like to mention just two which are very special, the NCCR Robotics and the Artists in Lab program, the NCCR Robotics National Competence Center for Robotics Research. We actually, when I was in Shanghai, I will say something about that in just a second. When I was in Shanghai, Dario Floriano from EPFL had similar ideas of, setting up a national program that would unite all the robotics research laboratories in Switzerland. We wrote that. We were there for a week or 10 days, writing, and we submitted. It was very competitive, and luckily enough, it was accepted. And Dario Floriano is the director of this NCCR, and I had the pleasure of being a co-director with Dario. Dario is also here in the audience. The next project, the other project that I would like to mention because it's a bit special, is the Artists in Lab, which was started by Jill Scott at the University of the Arts in Zurich. So artists can go into research labs, they can get money for it with a project. And we've always had artists in our laboratory, and people really like to interact with them. And one of the reasons is that artists typically have no money, or they have very little money. And so they cannot do it the standard way. They always have to think about something, special. They have to be particularly creative to do that. So we have learned actually a lot from the artists. Okay, back to this book. It was published in 2007. In 2008, Wenwei Yu from Chiba University, who is originally from Shanghai, and Wei Dongchen from Shanghai Jiao Tong University, who is also in in the video conference, they suggested to do a Chinese translation. And very quickly, it was there. We had the book called Body Intelligence, and then we thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a lecture series to go along with this book now that we have the book? And as a follow-up on the Shanghai lectures, there were the Shanghai lectures. And it was, you know, very similar, natural and artificial intelligence, weekly video conference, an experiment in global teaching and intercultural cooperation. And here is the first lecture at Shanghai Jiaotong University in October 2009. Maybe this would be a good place, Weidong and Hesheng, for a short statement. Yeah, Weidong is there. Hi, Weidong. Can we hear you? Can you say something? We have a sound problem, huh? I think we have a sound problem.
Hello?
Ah, yeah,
Hello.
it works. Yeah, yeah. Now it works. We can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Weidong. Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Weidong.
Yes, I'm Weidong Chen from Autonomous Robotic Lab, Shanghai Jiaotong University, China. It's my honor to join your farewell lecture. It was a wonderful experience to be the host of the first Shanghai lecture in 2009. In the past 5 years of continuous success, the Shanghai lecture built a sustainable community of students and researchers in the area of embedded intelligence and brought global teacher to a new level. I and our students not only enjoy all lectures and invited talks by you and other world-renowned AI and robotic scientists in the global virtual lecture hall, but also enjoy very much Swiss cheese fondue made by yourself in the real world. By means of video conference technologies, 3D virtual environment, and robot computation, the Shanghai lecture provides an interactive way to the Chinese student to communicate and cooperate with partners from different parts of the world. Some students told me that the Shanghai lecture gave them intuitive feeling of the Earth village and the small world. I'd like to take this chance to say thank you, Rolf. Thank you for your brilliant leadership and contribution to the Shanghai lecture and all our community. I and Hesheng and all members of our life are looking very much forward to working with you in Shanghai in the near future.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So in Shanghai, similar, we had a trailer, beautiful trailer by Valerie Buchmann. This will run like every week.
Welcome to the Shanghai lecture once again. Welcome to the Global Virtual Lecture Hall.
Okay. Now we have had a very active participant from China, Dustin Li, from Xi'an, former capital of China. And do we have a connection? Dustin, are you there? Would you care to make a short comment?
Hello, Rolf. Can you hear me? Hello, Rolf. Can you hear me?
Can you make it a little louder?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Very well.
Okay. I'm very lucky to participate in Rolf's farewell lecture today because I think I was so lucky to have the opportunity to take part in Shanghai lectures. After I just finished my study in US. And my students have experienced the past 5 years global lectures and got so much from the distinctive viewpoints, the excellent speaking, the inspiring demonstration, and the very conscientious about teaching work. Rolf, the lecture you give us from Xi'an is still fresh in my mind. Also, the nice time we spent together at our campus, the Terracotta Warriors at the city wall, you're always pretty cool. Rolf?
Yes.
We have more further cooperation and visiting in China from now on. You're welcome. Thank you, Rolf.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we have two more statements. One by Vera Sabotkina from Moscow. She is from the University of the Humanities, so she has always been providing the perspective from the human sciences on the topic of intelligence, which has been very inspiring for all of us. So Vera, would you care to make a comment?
Oh yes, with great pleasure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Right. Rolf, let me first thank you for this wonderful, inspirational experience. You know, once Edna O'Brien said, move your body, move your brain. And of course, you managed to put our brain in gear. You managed to move our brains to stimulate and to set the new tasks and challenges. It's one thing. But on the other hand, in the true spirit of embodiment, you managed to be a perfect navigator, and you demonstrated the navigation behavior, which was exemplary. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. And so you managed to navigate your, Shanghai lectures between the Darrell and the Black Sea, between all the Scholars and Charybdis, and we were so happy to navigate with you. But sometimes there were problems, sometimes there were technical problems, and we speak about conceptual metaphors which are based on embodied cognition, and metaphors of emotion arise from internal body states. And for example, when we experienced anger, the skin temperature and blood pressure rises during the technical, setbacks. So the anger can be conceptualized as the heat of a fluid that releases pressure. So our blood was boiling sometimes, and sometimes we let off steam, but we felt your positive emotions. And you see, that's another feature that you can be proud of, because you, apart from putting our brain in gear, you also warmed up our emotions. And here another embodied experience comes to my mind. Conceptual metaphors of emotions are motivated by embodied experience. When children are held affectionately by their parents, the experience of affection correlates with the experience of warmth. And that leads to conceptual metaphor, affection is warmth. We felt your affection, we felt your warmth, we felt your emotions, your subtle sense of humor. And that made your lectures absolutely invaluable. And I'd like to say that you set the standard of a new culture. This culture of global lecturing, global teaching is absolutely new culture, and you managed to reach the toppest, the highest level of performance. Your lectures were multimodal, they were multidimensional, and they were so there's a German word, multitasking Fähigkeit. They were just multitasking all the time, and our hearts, our brains responded to this. I would like also to say that modern research should meet the demands of III. Modern research should be, first I, international, second, interdisciplinary, and intersectoral, connect with other sectors of economy. You've demonstrated a perfect example of III approach. And the last but not least, We felt your dedication, and you know, you are not turning the wheel of fortune, you are turning the wheel of dedication, for which we are so thankful to you, and we are looking forward to future possible lectures, meetings, dedications, and I'd like to thank Professor Ernst Pöpel from Munich, who put us in contact, and I thank you, Rolf, for being so responsive and for really leading us in this very difficult world, global world of challenges and innovations. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vera. Okay, thanks very much. So now we have a last statement, last but not least, from Christopher Luke from Australia. I think he's the one who had to stay up the latest of all of them. He is, you know, special in the sense he's also, like Josh Bongard, a former PhD student of our laboratory and has been a professor in Australia for quite some time. So Christopher, first tell us, what time is it now in Australia?
The local time is about 12 minutes past 3 a.m.
Well, thanks for staying up so late.
My pleasure.
Okay, so would you care to...
Rolf, it's a huge honor to be part of your farewell lecture, of course. And we do that as Shanghai lecture style using video conferencing. And we managed to connect over a distance of some 16,000 kilometers. And you were not just my PhD supervisor in the mid to late 90s. You actually had a profound influence on the way I look at research. And also, what makes a particular research question an interesting research question, because there are quite a few boring ones and there are very few really interesting ones. And the way that you conceptualize embodiment had a profound impact on my research, and actually to this day. And for the audience, I should probably mention that I don't work in AI. So I never worked in robotics, and I don't think I ever will work in robotics. Well, you know, to the extent that one can make plans, right?
Okay, yes.
My area of expertise is human-computer interaction design and information science, particularly human information behavior. And I would argue that in those areas we are really just at the beginning of understanding the profound implications of embodiment. And if I look at a few related areas, and that includes disciplines as diverse as health communication, marketing, consumer behavior, behavioral economics, you name it, then, well, don't ask me why the AI lab is shutting down. Anyway, Rolf, thank you for giving me the opportunity to have played a really tiny role in your amazing journey of yours, and I wish you all the best for what the next chapters of that journey bring. Cheers.
Great, thanks very much, Christopher. Okay, so we had the various versions of the book, Chinese, and then Samia Nifty Meziani, who's also, she's a professor in the UK. She translated this book also in Arabic. It's one of the few books on artificial intelligence that has been published in Arabic. And then Alex Pitti and I did, some of the older ones among us still speak French, right? And so we thought we would produce a French version, which is actually only about a third the same as before. The rest is new, and mostly Alex Pitti's ideas. Okay, so now we had this nice research program together, and we were looking, of course, for new challenges, and then, we were looking for new challenges, and then we came across an interesting fact. Of course, it's very obvious once you know it, but if you look at human beings, they are made about 85% of soft materials. The skeletal system, the weight of the skeletal system is only, it's a bit less than 15%. Now, if you look at robots, They're all made of steel, you know, hard plastics. They have electrical motors in the joints, so they're hard, right? Now, if we want to build robots that can mimic some of the great capacity, I mean, we can do lots and lots of things, and maybe one of the reasons why we can do so many things is because we are built of soft materials. So if we could mimic, you know, some of this softness in the system, first we have to understand it. We can no longer use classical control theory. And then we want to build soft systems. We could maybe make great achievements. And so we said, oh, soft robotics, and that's a new, well, you could say, well, it's maybe almost a hype now, you know. And it's an important part in the National Competence Center of Robotics. So the soft robotics, and the hypothesis is that the next generation of robots will be of the soft kind. Now, there is an interesting development that took place, has been taking place over the last 15 years. Robots used to be confined to the factory floors, you know, behind walls. But about 15 years ago, they started leaving the factory floors and coming into our own living space, so sharing their living space with our own. And that, of course, for that, you need completely new requirements for the robots. You need to be able to react, you know, to interact safely with humans, and maybe there you will need soft technology. And of course, you need to understand embodiment. So what do we mean by soft robotics? Literally soft to touch, but also soft movement, soft interaction. And then another lucky coincidence is that we had the opportunity to participate in the Octopus project, which was coordinated by Cecilia Laschi. She is also here in the audience from Pisa, Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna. And she had the vision, you know, of building an octopus robot. I mean, the octopus is sort of the epitome of a soft system. And it's unbelievable, the abilities that the octopus had. So we thought, if we only had part of that in a robot, and here you see some prototype robot arms, then we could achieve great things. Also, we have now, what's interesting about this is we now have a system with potentially infinitely many degrees of freedom. So forget about classical control theory. So we need to think in fundamentally different ways. Okay, now just sort of a bit of a crazy thing here. If you look at computation, and you know, artificial intelligence is a lot about computation, you always need a physical substrate that carries the computation, right? In a mobile phone or in a laptop, it's a silicon chip that carries the computation, right? Now, it turns out that you can also, in principle, use any physical substrate to do computation, as long as the physical substrate has an enough rich and complex dynamics. And Dao Li and Kohei Nakajima found that you can actually use a robot arm to do computation. And what you see here is this arm just moving back and forth. It's a very complicated, you can see a very complicated movement. And here it's actually performing function approximation. So in principle, the octopus with their arms could perform function approximation. I don't know to what extent that will be really useful for them, but in principle, they could do it. Okay, back to the research program. There is one last thing that I would like to talk about, and that's this sort of yellowish area, learning development and humanoid robots. The last few minutes I will take for that. And it's about the Roboy project. Okay, there have been some precursors. You know, these Etche robots, they were tendon-driven systems. You know, normally robots have motors in the joints, but humans have muscles and tendons. And so these were the precursors, and obviously Etche means embodied cognition in a compliantly engineered robot. So we had a few of these, and this is just to give you an idea of how it actually moved. It's kind of crazy. Some people say it's the ugliest robot that they've ever seen. And so we thought, well, we should be able to do better than that. And last year, 2013, we had the 25th anniversary of our laboratory. And we had a celebration planned again for the March 2013. And in June 2012, at the lab, we had a discussion. I think it was Pascal Kaufmann. He suggested, wouldn't it be nice if we made ourselves a birthday present in the form of a robot that nobody had ever built before? And, you know, then the Roboy project emerged, and so we thought, okay, let's build Roboy. And so, by the way, that gave us exactly 9 months to create a robot boy. Roboy should be an ambassador of a new generation of robots that share their living space with our own, should be friendly, useful, and fun to be with. It should be used as a research platform to study the functioning of the muscle-tendon system, human-robot interaction, and the relation that I mentioned before between intelligence, thinking, and movement. And so I think this is now used as a platform, research platform, also in the Human Brain Project. Now, just to give you a very brief idea, it's tendon-driven, it has 48 muscles, and 8 muscles for the shoulder joint. Now, if you perform a movement like that, many muscles need to be coordinated and actuated to varying extents. Now, if we have learned that, we don't even realize the effort that's behind it. You know, it's a great achievement that we can do this. But in a robot, which muscles, we have 8 muscles to move the shoulder joint, which muscles do I have to actuate to what extent? We can't program that anymore. We really have to use learning systems, so there are a lot of great challenges here. And then we had the birthday celebration, Robots on Tour. I'm sure some of you have seen that. We had an announcement in 20 minutes, thanks to Beat Glocke for making this possible. And then, you know, we had the long lines in front of Pulse 5, and it was always packed. Roboy was there. And now maybe we can have a few words from Roboy. Raphael Hostetler is the project leader of the Roboy project. So can we have the camera on? Ah, yeah, okay. Oh, okay, okay. Okay. It should be this one.
Oh, that's better. Hi all. Hi everyone, I'm Roboy. It's a pleasure to meet you. Hey. Hey, listen. I want to show you how I can feel. I can be happy. I can be shy. I can be surprised. Cool. I can be angry. I can blink with my eye. I can be tired and go to sleep. And I can give you a kiss. Mom. Okay, that was enough from me. I will be at the reception later. We can take photos then. Back to you, Rolf.
Okay, thank you very much, Roboy. Okay, we're almost done. So we had an enormous media coverage. It was unbelievable all over the world. And then Roboy, together with Raphael, has been traveling around the world. We were in Beijing, we were in Shanghai at the Science and Technology Museum. I mean, the kids really go crazy about the robot. Here you see Roboy in a wheelchair because he can't walk yet. And we had it in Washington, D.C. at the Swiss Embassy. Here, girls having fun. We had it in TEDx, we had it at CeBIT in Hanover on the front page. And also what I like very much, it was on the NASDAQ webpage. And you know, when you have a technology somewhere in a technological magazine, it's not very interesting, but if you have it in an economic magazine, then it's important. Okay, so question, what do I do next? Well, I think it's time to move on. I will be spending time at Osaka University, I will be spending time at Shanghai Jiao Tong University, and very special, I will be working on a project called Rolf's Robot Lounge in Shanghai, where robots will take care of the well-being of the customers. And here is sort of an image. And coming to an end, summarizing, it's been an exciting time. It's been a real odyssey. And one of the big insights really was, the more we understand, or we think we understand, the more we respect nature, the more we respect what evolution has actually come up with. But then I think we can actually use that knowledge, and we can build better and better machines. It's been a really exciting time, and I think this has only been possible with your continuous support and friendship, support from the global scientific community, and many personal friends, family, students, faculty from around the planet. And I would also like to thank all the labbers and alumni who spent a lot of time at the laboratory and made all of this possible. So I'm not going to read all the names here. Okay. So don't leave yet. Everyone, please join the reception. So it's going to be in Foyer West, which is basically, I think, 2 or 3 floors down, next to the Lichthof on the other side of the building, towards the other side of the building. Okay, so our slogan, Better Robots, Better Life. Thank you all for coming here. Thank you for participating in the video conference, especially those who were very late. Thanks very much. Akio, Christopher, Vera, Yasuo, who else? Weidong, and I can hardly see it. It's so. Okay, well,
Rolf?
Thanks very much.
Rolf?
That's very difficult for me to see.
Hello,
okay.
hello, Rolf. This is Josh calling from the National Science Foundation.
Hey, Josh, good to see you. You finally made it.
I wanted to very briefly toast you. And as Yasuo mentioned, we usually toast embodiment with a bottle of beer. But since I'm at the National Science Foundation, I only have water. And instead of toasting embodiment, I'd like to toast you. So here's to Rolf. Thank you for all
I also
years,
do it
Rolf.
with water. Yeah, thanks very much, Josh.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for watching the live stream. Do we have a last word from Roboy? A last word from
It's about time
Roboy?
you stop talking. Let's go for drinks, and then to the future.
Okay, thank you. Better robots, better life.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment in time where it comes to saying thank you, particularly thank you from the department. When we thought about, well, what could we do as a farewell present to Rolf, the first thing came, well, obviously ask Tammy, his secretary, what would she suggest to do? And then we came upon a contribution in your Festschrift to the 20th anniversary of the iLab, And this was a citation from Jörg Fröhlich, who is also here. This is a fellow student in physics at ETH, who later became a professor of theoretical physics at ETH. And he characterized your joint study time at ETH with the words, I cite, "A time when a gambler and a procrastinator studied physics at ETH and made a Dionysian experience of life." So we thought that changing to the status of emeritus might be an occasion to, well, pull the gear a little bit down and maybe do a little bit more of rediscovering the Dionysian way of life. And so what we actually did, and Tommy, please come. We decided that you have a kind of sample from Dieter Meyer's Over the Aqua Weinkontor, and that the pleasure isn't ending too early. We have, well, another moonshine for you so that you can have more supplies as soon as this is extinguished. And this is also with the best greetings from all the members of the Department of Informatics. Thank you all the best for your future, and, well, take care and go strong.